Chapter 1. Streetlights flickered against the thick, dark smog engulfing the city. Mystique was heading home. Her neon heels struck the cracked concrete violently, struggling to cope with her inebriated swagger. Her real name was Claire Trent. She was 32, pretending she was 23, a lie that was starting to show. It was a cool July night, but she'd been working hard, and the sticky autumn breeze helped relieve her aching shoulders. She carried her coat over her arm, not caring that her sequined costume underneath left nothing to the imagination. To hell with what anyone thought. That had always been her motto. Sure, she was a prostitute, but she wasn't one of those girls standing on the street corners paying off a habit that was never going to go away. Claire worked at Lulu's. She had fans. She was drunk on champagne, and the tiny dress she wore was worth more than most people in Savon could save in a year. It was 4 a.m. The streets were gently swaying as the nightclubs started to close. Swarms of rich Londoners piled out into the streets, singing and whistling at her. She smiled and slipped past, casually shouting that she'd be at Lulu's tomorrow for anyone who could afford her. London closed the border for curfew at 10, leaving any passholder in Savon to party all night or find some hovel to crawl into until morning. The bars stayed open until the crack of dawn, but usually by now Londoners were already deep into sampling all the sordid delights Savon had to offer, and there was a lot to sample. The groups that lurked around the streets had missed their window. They were either too drunk or too poor to benefit from a room in one of the many brothels lining the border. But it was hot, and nobody cared about staying outside when dawn was so close. Another crowd that passed had jeered excitedly. She contended with their snatching hands and danced away from them. The trick was to do it in good humour. Creating a scene drew attention, and the last thing Claire needed was trouble. She quickened her step, ignoring the blisters, screaming at her heels. Some of the crowd broke away and followed her. 2 called out, offered her the time of her life, and she couldn't help laugh out loud. They persisted for another block, and she ignored them. It was always like this, and she had survived her 32 years using the right blend of ruthless determination and a cast iron nerve. She walked another 2 streets before realising she was still being followed. This wouldn't be the first time some arsehole thought he could take his chances with her, but Claire had been around long enough to know how to handle herself. She casually withdrew the flick knife she kept in her coat, along with the mace spray Lulu had handed out to all the girls. With a quick shuffle of her coat, she was ready. She slowed her steps, enjoying the control she had. The presence was nearing. She felt something behind her, something big and cold, felt hands reaching around the back of her neck, closing in, fingertips brushing her skin. This was her moment of power. She turned, choosing the knife over the spray. It plunged into nothing. There was no one there. The empty street rolled out into darkness, but the tightening of her neck continued. The knife dropped to the ground as she tried to push away the crushing force against her throat. She couldn't breathe. Her body lifted. She kicked out, her heels barely scraping the pavement beneath. The hold tightened, and she lost control of everything, her breathing, her bladder, her life. The bones in her arms and legs started to bend. She wanted to cry out, but all she could do was croak. As her eyesight started to blacken, she saw a shape, a figure in the distance with an arm outstretched towards her. She tried to reach out, but it was too late. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Her last thoughts before the end came. Harvey's hurried footsteps slowed. At the end of the street, he could see the body of a woman. Hesitantly he approached, checking around for signs of anyone watching. This was the 3rd girl. He took out his phone and captured the moment for his collection.